Originally, this was going to be progressive disciplinary actions. I really just sort of changed the name of the training to performance management, because the progressive disciplinary action is really part of performance management, and I'll intertwine that into this. And so the agenda, actually, we're going to just focus on performance management process today, the competency expectations, the performance evals, and the performance improvement plans will be in subsequent trainings. The performance evals, I know we just did a little orientation around evals on Paylocity, but that was more of a, how to use the tool. It was less about how to actually conduct a performance eval. So when we get to that, I'll go into greater detail. A lot of this is based on current research done within the last few years. Some of the statistics I'll show you, result of Gallup polls and some other research. But a recent study back in 2018 showed that 79% of employees quit because they did not feel appreciated. That's pretty significant. And Ryan's joining us now. What does that tell you about, what our focus should be when we're supervising employees? Does anyone want to chime in on that? What that tells me is that relationships are the most important thing to employees. So part of the performance management, some of the crucial functions of the performance management plan is it ensures alignment of individual performance goals with organizational goals. What are some of our organizational goals? Now, we all know the overarching mission of the agency to improve the quality of life by supporting independence, but what are some of the goals we have as an agency? Hopefully some of you will have some ideas of what are some of our goals, or what do you think our goals should be?
Effective documentation and maintaining training certificates.
Maintaining certification and documenting is a goal for the agency.
Open communication.
Anything else?
Community inclusion.
Community inclusion. There's some bigger agency goals. I mean, things that we don't often talk about, but fiscal responsibility. So part of performance improvement or part of performance management, good performance management allows us to keep good employees. And if we keep our employees, it cuts down on overtime. So a good performance management plan ensures alignment of individual performance goals with organizational goals. And some of the organizational goals are sort of umbrella goals, like, again, fiscal responsibility, providing quality service is important. So any type of conversation you're having with employees during a supervision or during maybe a written warning or even an annual eval, or most importantly an annual eval, should have some discussion around organizational goals. For instance, providing quality service. Like, what are they doing to contribute? And someone else is joining us. Can I just ask who just joined us?
I think it's Terry and Darnell.
Okay. It keeps good performance improvement plans or performance management plans keeps employees motivated and engaged. And it helps build key competencies. What are some key competencies for DSPs?
Documentation.
I think right now the big documentation's a big deal, isn't it? You talked about community inclusion, so being creative with community inclusion ideas, keeping consumers interested and engaged and motivated. So a lot of what they're doing with consumers, we're doing with our employees. But we're trying to build up their key competencies. Providing personal care, med administration, that sort of thing. Performance management plans are important to the organization because it's a way to focus the work of individuals on the mission and strategic goals. It's a way to identify barriers as they arise, catch problems early, and prevent problems. What are some, again, I'm trying to engage, it'd be great to have some conversation just so you're not bored with my voice for the next 50 minutes or so. What are some, when you're engaging with your employees, how do you identify barriers? What's a barrier to them providing good care to our consumers? What are some barriers for individual employees that you may be concerned with?
Like language at times, is that?
Yep, language can be a barrier, absolutely. So for instance, around language, you have an employee come in. Can you imagine starting a job in a country where the language is not your first, and some rudimentary, you know enough to get by. I think Terry's having some trouble. You know enough to get by. So we've got people where English is their second language, and they're doing pretty well in their personal lives, but you come to work and there's some more complex language that they have to understand here at work. You have a new employee where English is not their first language. What are some of the ways you can support their performance right from the start?
Ask Steve to come?
Yeah, ask Steve to come. The other thing I think about is just making sure they feel comfortable and making sure that they know that we're going to be patient and work with them if they want to do a good job. Because I look at someone's motivation. If they want to do a good job, they want to perform well, they're here for the right reasons, I will be as patient as I need to be with that person so that they can succeed. So if I identify language as a barrier, yeah, I'm going to get Steve, absolutely. But go ahead.
Sorry. No, another thing is we have a lot of homes that are only female workers and not male. That has a lot to do with it too. If you're female or male, where you can work.
Absolutely. But just real quick, I'll get back to that. But the language, I want to make sure people feel that we're not, that we're going to be patient with them so that they feel like they belong here. Right? Because again, why do people leave? Almost 80% of people leave because really it comes down to relationships. So male versus female, yes, that can be a barrier. Some of our homes require female-only staff. And then we've got some employees who will only perform or support personal care to people of their own gender. And sometimes we want that, and sometimes we want them to be more versatile and be more professional and comfortable providing care to someone who's not their gender.
May I say something?
Yeah.
Let's take a scenario that supposing that Steve wasn't around, how are we going to manage?
How are we going to manage?
Yeah, yes, supposing that Steve wasn't around, and I think Steve is good that he comes, but he's only one person. And what if we need him in 2, 3 different houses at the same, like something happened and we need to address it at the same time.
Yeah.
GMS
is
I'm just trying to have like an open mind, a kind of open mind discussion,
Absolutely. GMS, we're really fortunate to have a DSP educator who's multilingual. And I've talked to other HR directors. I've talked to many HR directors, and they're amazed we have that position, and they think that's such a wonderful. So you're right. We are kind of, I guess, spoiled in a way for having him, and without him, we may not be able to address some of these barriers so easily. In the past, we've looked at other resources, like I've used Apollo. We have USANO. We've had to ask this. That's really a time too when we identify other employees within the program who can mentor that person. A good portion, more than half of our employees are multilingual. So there's really no reason within that employee group, we must be able to find people who can mentor other DSPs and help support them learning the English language, enough so that they can do a good job. We do a lot of screening at first. I mean, they do a brief writing eval. And we also, of course, we have the interview process, so we know that they have basic English skills. But still, you're right. It continues to be a struggle. I don't know. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
Well, I think you've touched on it where we've used other employees. I definitely can remember both Apollo and Jermaine being just a strong support to new employees, helping them understand, our directions and expectations or understanding policies.
Right.
We've also done cheat sheets for people and just broken down some of our lengthy protocols, just more in more simpler sentences, and had other, done things like you said, other co-workers working with them for a while to help them understand.
Yep. No, that's good. All right, great. So, and some other barriers we'll just touch on real quick, daycare, struggle with daycare, people coming in late, people having, hey, people have lives outside of work, and sometimes as managers, we have to be aware of their struggles outside of work because it does impact what's going on here at work. You notice someone's being a little moody, check in with them. Maybe something's going on, it may not be something you can help with, but just by checking in with them, again, helps build the relationship, shows that you have an interest in their life and their performance. And sure, give them an ear for 10 minutes. Again, we don't want to get into problem solving for people, and we don't want to become social workers, but we can certainly listen. So good performance management plans help us conform to legal requirements. Just real quick, when I think of legal requirements, I think of, should there be a complaint to the state, the Department of Labor, being able to answer questions that they may have to show that, we acted in good faith and we provided the employee with as much opportunity as possible to succeed. And we basically terminated based on their conduct and nothing else. So to have data to make human resource decisions. So this is why I'm always asking for documentation when I have to help you guys decide what are we going to do with this person? Are we going to suspend them? Really, it's one of my jobs is to approve terminations, and when I do that, I don't just listen to your sort of story as to what occurred. I also look historically at the employee, and I have to look and see how we've been supporting this person. You know, do we give them another chance? So those are some of the questions I have to think to myself when I'm helping make that decision. And a good performance management plan is just, it demonstrates we're continually helping to develop our employees. Why it's important to managers. Good performance. And by the way, when I'm just backing up a little bit, when I say performance management, I'm thinking of the entire life cycle of the employee, from orientation to termination or retirement or whatever. So this includes supervisions, the formal disciplinary actions, terminations, that sort of thing, annual evals, 90-day evals. So when I say performance management, that's really what I'm talking about. So it's a good way for managers to communicate job expectations. It provides information about how well each employee is performing, helps employees make many of the decisions on their own. And I'm going to show a brief video in a few minutes about autonomy and how important that is to employees. You all enjoy autonomy. And autonomy is something that we've earned as managers and directors. But you know what, our employees, our DSPs can earn some level of autonomy as well, wherever we can give it to them, allow them to make their own decisions about things. It's a method for documenting performance problems, and it's a way to provide recognition for good performance. Boy, another part of this is those impressions. I'm very happy with how popular the impressions are. It gives people immediate feedback. People love the impressions, and it makes people feel good when they get them. So we give out a lot of impressions every month, and I'm very happy about that. Why it's important for employees? Well, helps them know what their manager expects them to do. It's important to receive regular specific feedback about their about their performance. To know how their work contributes to the organization's mission. Do all of your employees know what the mission is of GMS? Everyone should be able to say what the GMS mission is, even if some version of it. They may mix it up, but it doesn't matter. As long as they understand we're trying to improve lives by supporting independence, and there's a lot we can do to contribute to that mission. Every DSP, every employee can contribute to that mission. And your supervisions and your evals should reflect some discussion about the agency's mission. It provides recognition and appreciation for the job, and it gives them opportunities to develop. Okay, the performance equation. Performance is a function of these three components: motivation, competence, and environment. We'll talk a fair amount about motivation. Actually, I want to show a video right now. It's about it's a 10-minute video. Some of you have already seen it, and I apologize for that, but again, it's only 10 minutes, and I watch it about once a year to remind me about some of the priorities as far as performance management with employees.
Our motivations are unbelievably interesting. I mean, I've been working on this for a few years, and I just find the topic still so amazingly engaging and interesting. So I want to tell you about that. The science is really surprising. The science is a little bit freaky, okay? We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think. There's a whole set of unbelievably interesting studies. I want to give you two that call into question this idea that if you reward something, you get more of the behavior you want. If you punish something, you get less of it. So let's go from London to the mean streets of Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the northeastern part of the United States. And let's talk about a study done at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Here's what they did. They took a whole group of students, and they gave them a set of challenges. Things like memorizing strings of digits, solving word puzzles, other kinds of spatial puzzles, even physical tasks like throwing a ball through a hoop. Okay, they gave them these challenges, and they said to incentivize their performance, they gave them 3 levels of rewards. Okay? So if you did pretty well, you got a small monetary reward. If you did medium well, you got a medium monetary reward. And if you did really well, if you were one of the top performers, you got a large cash prize. Okay? We've seen this movie before. This is essentially a typical motivation scheme within organizations, right? We reward the very top performers, we ignore the low performers, and the other folks kind of in the middle. Okay, you get a little bit. So what happens? They do the test, they have these incentives. Here's what they found out. 1, as long as the task involved only mechanical skill, bonuses worked as they would be expected. The higher the pay, the better their performance. Okay, that makes sense. But here's what happens. But once the task called for even rudimentary cognitive skill, a larger reward led to poorer performance. Now, this is strange, right? A larger reward led to poorer performance? How can that possibly be? Now, what's interesting about this is that these folks here who did this are all economists, 2 at MIT, 1 at the University of Chicago, 1 at Carnegie Mellon, okay, the top tier of the economics profession. And they're reaching this conclusion that seems contrary to what a lot of us learned in economics, which is that the higher the reward, the better their performance. And they're saying that once you get above rudimentary cognitive skill, it's the other way around. Which seems like this kind of, the idea that these rewards don't work that way seems vaguely left-wing and socialist, doesn't it? It's kind of this kind of weird socialist conspiracy. For those of you who have those conspiracy theories, I want to point out the notoriously left-wing socialist group that financed the research, the Federal Reserve Bank. So this is the mainstream of the mainstream coming to a conclusion that's quite surprising, seems to defy the laws of behavioral physics. So this is strange. It's strange finding. So what do? They say, this is freaky. Let's go test it somewhere else. Maybe that $50 or $60 prize isn't sufficiently motivating for an MIT student, right? So let's go to a place where $50 is actually more significant relatively, right? So let's take the experiment. We're going to go to Madurai, India, rural India, where $50, $60, whatever the number was, is actually a significant sum of money. So they replicated the experiment in India roughly as follows. Small rewards, the equivalent of 2 weeks' salary. Small performance, low performance, 2 weeks' salary. Medium performance, about a month's salary. High performance, about 2 months' salary. Okay, so those are real good incentives. Okay, so you're going to get a different result here. Well, what happened, though, was that the people offered the medium reward did no better than the people offered the small reward. But this time around, the people offered the top reward. They did worst of all. Higher incentives led to worse performance. What's interesting about this is that it actually isn't all that anomalous. This has been replicated over and over and over again by psychologists, by some extent by sociologists, and by economists, over and over and over again. For simple, straightforward tasks, those kinds of incentives, if you do this, then you get that, they're great. For tasks that are algorithmic, set of rules where you have to just follow along and get a right answer, if-then rewards, carrots and sticks, outstanding. But when the task gets more complicated, when it requires some conceptual, creative thinking, those kinds of motivators demonstrably don't work. In fact, money is a motivator at work, but in a slightly strange way. If you don't pay people enough, they won't be motivated. What's curious about, there's another paradox here, which is that the best use of money as a motivator is to pay people enough to take the issue of money off the table. Pay people enough so that they're not thinking about money and they're thinking about the work. Now, once you do that, it turns out there are 3 factors that the science shows lead to better performance, not to mention personal satisfaction. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is our desire to be self-directed, to direct our own lives. Now, in many ways, traditional notions of management run afoul of that. Management is great if you want compliance, but if you want engagement, which is what we want in the workforce today as people are doing more complicated, sophisticated things, self-direction is better. Let me give you some examples of this, of almost radical forms of self-direction in the workplace that lead to good results. Let's start with this company right here, Atlassian, an Australian company. It's a software company, and they do something really cool. Once a quarter on a Thursday afternoon, they say to their developers, for the next 24 hours, you can work on anything you want. You can work on it the way you want. You can work on it with whomever you want. All we ask is that you show the results to the company at the end of those 24 hours in this fun kind of meeting, not a star chamber session, but this fun meeting with beer and cake and fun and other things like that. It turns out that that one day of pure, undiluted autonomy has led to a whole array of fixes for existing software, a whole array of ideas for new products that otherwise had never emerged. One day. Now, this is not an if-then incentive. This is not the sort of thing that I would have done 3 years ago before I knew this research. I would have said, you want people to be creative and innovative? Give them a freaking innovation bonus. If you can do something cool, I'll give you $2,500. They're not doing this at all. They're essentially saying, you probably want to do something interesting. Let me just get out of your way. One day of autonomy produces things that had never emerged. Now, let's talk about mastery. Mastery is our urge to get better at stuff. We like to get better at stuff. This is why people play musical instruments on the weekend. You got all these people who are acting in ways that seem irrational economically. They play musical instruments on weekends. Why? It's not going to get them a mate. It's not going to make them any money. Why are they doing it? Because it's fun, because you get better at it, and that's satisfying. Go back in time a little bit. I imagine this if I went to my first economics professor, a woman named Mary Alice Schulman, and I went to her in 1983 and said, Professor Schulman, can I talk to you after class for a moment? Yeah. I got this inkling. I got this idea for a business model. I just want to run it past you. Here's how it would work. You get a bunch of people around the world who are doing highly skilled work, but they're willing to do it for free and volunteer their time, 20, sometimes 30 hours a week. Okay, she's looking at you somewhat skeptically there. Oh, but I'm not done. And then what they create, they give it away rather than sell it. It's going to be huge. But she truly would have thought I was insane. Okay, it seemed to fly in the face of so many things. But what do you have? You have Linux powering 1 out of 4 corporate servers in Fortune 500 companies, Apache powering more than the majority of web servers, Wikipedia. What's going on? Why are people doing this? Why are these people, many of whom are technically sophisticated, highly skilled people who have jobs? Okay? They have jobs. They're working at jobs for pay, doing sophisticated technological work. And yet, during their limited discretionary time, they do equally, if not more, technically sophisticated work, not for their employer, but for someone else for free. That's a strange economic behavior. Economists who look into it, why are they doing this? It's overwhelmingly clear. Challenge and mastery, along with making a contribution. That's it. What you see more and more is a rise of what you might call the purpose motive, is that more and more organizations want to have some kind of transcendent purpose, partly because it makes coming to work better, partly because that's the way to get better talent. And what we're seeing now is, in some ways, when the profit motive becomes unmoored from the purpose motive, bad things happen. Bad things ethically sometimes, but also bad things just like not good stuff, like crappy products, like lame services, like uninspiring places to work. That when the profit motive is paramount, or when it becomes completely unhitched from the purpose motive, people don't do great things. More and more organizations are realizing this and sort of disturbing the categories between what's profit and what's purpose. And I think that actually heralds something interesting. And I think that the organizations that are flourishing, whether they're profit, for profit, or somewhere in between, are animated by this purpose model. Let me give you a couple of examples. Here's the founder of Skype. He says, our goal is to be disruptive, but in the cause of making the world a better place. Pretty good purpose. Here's Steve Jobs. I want to put a ding in the universe. All right? That's the kind of thing that might get you up in the morning and racing to go to work. So I think that we are purpose maximizers, not only profit maximizers. I think the science shows that we care about mastery very, very deeply. And the science shows that we want to be self-directed. And I think that the big takeaway here is that if we start treating people like people, and not assuming that they're simply horses, slower, smaller, better smelling horses. If we get past this kind of ideology of carrots and sticks and look at the science, I think we can actually build organizations and work lives that make us better off, but I also think they have the promise to make our world just a little bit better.
I always find that to be a fascinating. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I always find that to be a fascinating video from the standpoint of an employer, and so someone who's interested in psychology as well. But what is that? What do you take? What do you take from that, or what? What are some of the striking things from that video for you, and how do you think that you can apply some of that to the DSPs? Now, I know that he referred a lot to technology companies and sort of this higher level skill set. How do we implement some of this theory to our work with the DSPs? Anyone have any thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I think one component, as he said, was that people don't have to, when they get to the point where they're not thinking about money, they're able to think about work and their performance. But I think for us, some of our guys are working 80 hours a week at 3 different jobs, so they maybe don't have the, obviously we're not in a position where we can,
Right.
give a substantial amount of money, you know what I mean? But I think that is somewhat of a factor. If you've got somebody who's doing overnights at one place and then working full-time at another place during the day, it's like, obviously their performance is going to.
Yeah. And that's sort of one of the things I think about when I watch that video and think about our DSPs is like, well, could we ever really take money off the table? Because they're always, we can only pay so much. I mean, we've gone up quite a bit. I think when I started, we were paying DSPs a little over $10 an hour or something like that. And now, a lot of them are making closer to 15. So we've gone up quite a bit, but we'll probably never get to a point where they, can just stop thinking about money. They're all, our DSPs are always going to be struggling to pay the bills, and they're going to work paycheck to paycheck. And that's an unfortunate reality of the position. But still, do you think we could take some of what we just learned from that video and apply any of it to our DSPs? I talk mostly about DSPs because that's the majority of our workforce, and that's your group of supervisees. Certainly, there's many ways to apply that for managers, but again, going back to the DSPs, are there any, if you look back, you can see my slides now, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So performance management, so we'll go back to the video as we further our discussion here, but performance management is a daily activity. It's agency culture, setting clear expectations, positive relationships, and effective communication. Let me go to my next slide and then we'll go back to the video. So part of performance management is your supervision and team meetings. During your supervisions and team meetings, what do you think you might be able to? What discussions or activities could you have during your one-on-ones or team meetings that where you sort of take some of what you learned from that video and implement it?
I think that not using it as like a money, I don't know. I think when I watch it, I think like the money piece, that's it. But, I look to use that as like member goals. And, you can kind of get the staff in there figure out how to get the best result with our members.
Yeah.
So I think putting it more towards accomplishments than money in
Right.
meetings.
No, right. Like, ask them, get them to contribute to what's going on in the homes and with the individuals we serve. Rather than, I think we get into this mode where we're always telling people what to do this, do that, let's go through this agenda. And, you know, we have to be doing that. That's always going to be, and that's part of clear communication and clear expectations. So we have to be doing that, but we don't want to fall into this, you know, this mode where that's all we're doing. Sometimes I feel like, and, you know, again, this isn't a criticism. We all fall into it, but where we're telling people what to do all the time, and we're doing a lot of disciplinary action. But what, you know, there's things we could be doing more of, and that's getting people to contribute, getting people to feel like they belong here at GMS. You know, in the end, we want people to want to work here more than they work at another agency. We know a lot of our DSPs work at 2 or 3 different places, but what, you know, how do we make GMS the best of those 3 agencies to work for? You know, part of that is getting them to feel like they belong to GMS, that they contribute, that they're part of a you know, I hate to use the word family, but it's a type of a family. They belong here and they can contribute. So, and it's one of the things I liked about Paylocity, not just the impressions, but the community board. I want people to use that more often, and people being able to create their own groups on that community board. You know, Steve has done that, but we haven't really gotten anyone else to do it yet. At some point, we'll kind of push that a little bit. But other key components, peer-to-peer support. That goes back to what I was talking about before. What would we do without Steve? You know, if we have a positive agency culture and a culture where people feel like they can contribute, then you've got peers who want to mentor other DSPs, you know, peer-to-peer support. But of course, all this starts with orientation. I know I'm kind of, I should have started with orientation, but I'm just sort of going with the flow of our conversation. But it does all start with orientation. I try to instill this in with Shyla and Stacy. All 3 of us participate in that initial HR orientation. I always do a welcome. I do a welcome to GMS. I get to know them a little bit. I spend a little time, you know, asking them about themselves, what they want to share with the group. And I give them a history of GMS, and how important agencies like GMS are to the individuals we serve, how important the DSP role is. And I know Kelly does a great job as well the rest of the week. Kelly's got a big responsibility the rest of the week. But during that week, it's also an important time for you as managers to be connecting with your new employees. Again, welcoming them and talking about the program, talking about their first day, and making them feel like they belong. I've shared this brief story before, but I got a job at Southern Maine Med years ago as a phlebotomist. And my first day there, people were like, I didn't know this guy was starting. I'm not going to train him. Well, I'm not going to train him. I don't have time to train. And everyone was sort of like doing this hot potato thing with me. And that was almost my last day. I almost walked out of there. And over time, you know, they ended up being a great bunch of people, but none of them realized how important that first day was for me. And how important your impressions are on people. You know, I ended up staying there for, you know, 6 years or so, and I ended up becoming the supervisor of the lab the phlebotomy lab, and I had a wonderful experience. But again, none of that would have happened if I had walked out, and I almost did. So individual supervisions, feedback in the moment. We get so busy, I think we fail to do that a lot. The feedback in the moment. Hey, you're doing a great job, but let's do it a little bit more like this. Give them the praise for the effort, and then sort of guide them in a different direction, towards, again, it's about developing their competency. If they don't get the feedback from you, they're not going to be able to develop the key competencies we want them to develop. And that's one of the things I asked before termination. What have we done to contribute to this employee's success here at GMS, or have we just contributed to their failure? Have we failed this employee? In the end, when we terminate someone, I really want it to be their choice. We gave them plenty of opportunity, and then they just made the choices that they shouldn't have made. So, and then of course, performance evaluations, which we talk a lot about. Here's Maslow. You've probably all heard of Maslow, and this, as new studies come out and new suggestions about workplace motivation, Maslow's kind of going by the wayside, but I'm still a big fan of Maslow, Abraham Maslow, and his hierarchy of needs. You can look at this from a macro level, up 10,000 feet. And then you can look at that's the one thing I like about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is that you can look at this from the individual perspective for each employee, and then, sort of look at it from a higher altitude as well. And we've talked a little bit about this, the physiological needs. Right now, what's everyone concerned about the most?
Toilet paper.
Toilet paper. Yeah, you didn't think too much about that, did you? Toilet paper. Well, you're right. Toilet paper, basic needs, and they're thinking about what else? What's going on? Is it too obvious? The pandemic, COVID-19. Everyone's worried about going to work, and being safe. So what's GMS doing? Well, we're providing a safe work environment by mandating face masks, encouraging, distancing as much as absolutely possible, and then the hand washing, and the frequent cleaning. And if all those things are implemented as they're supposed to, then people should feel a little bit safer to be at work. These different levels mean different things for everyone. But just a quick overview of Maslow, these build on each other. Basically, the theory is if people's physiological needs are not met, then they're not able to move up this pyramid and work on achievement, work on relationships. If you don't have any food, that's all you're thinking about. If you have no dinner tonight because you can't afford it, you're probably going to be thinking about that most of the day. And that's also why, schools are feeding our kids for free. They're providing breakfast and it's a sad story, but so many kids are going without breakfast because they simply don't have the food at home. So schools know about Maslow. Schools know that kids aren't going to worry about their schoolwork or focus on schoolwork if they have an empty belly. So really here at work, there's not a lot we can do about physiological needs, although we do try to help people somewhat. This is physiological needs. That's something that may come up during a conversation with your employees, over the last year, finding out that people, every year, there's always at least one DSP that I find out is living out of their car. They've lost their apartment for one reason or another, or they're couch hopping or couch surfing, or however you want to put that. And what do? Well, we listen. You know, we've offered, we have given out like food, gift certificates, things like that, gas cards, clothing. So we do address that to a certain extent here at GMS to the extent that we can. In the end, we can't be responsible completely for people's physiological needs.
No, we've also, Matt, connected them with resources in the community for assistance.
Yes, that's a good.
Done that as well.
Yes, I've had calls, and I'll be on a phone call with someone and they'll share this with me, and I'll be on my computer as we're talking, trying to connect them with resources. So you're right. Safety needs, we've already sort of addressed that. So the social and esteem needs, that's some of the things, those are the two things that we should be addressing every day with our employees. The interpersonal relationships, again, those are the positive relationships, peer-to-peer, and also, you know, employee with manager. And then esteem needs, achievement. I think that is what we don't work on enough. And that's sort of what I was getting into. Helping them work. And through supervision, we get to know our employees and get to know what are their goals. Do they want to be, it's okay if they want to be a career DSP, but what do they want that to look like over the next 5 years? Or maybe they want to, you know, that this is just a stepping stone to something else for them. And that's great. If they're with us for a couple of years, that's wonderful. And we know that they're going to be moving on to something else. Let them know that's great. What can we do in our, what can we do to support that? And what I mean is, just a simplified example, someone who's interested in, in organizing activities. They really love that. Organizing and coming up with activities. Allow that person to do that for the program. Rather than us always dictating their daily schedule, let that person be the weekly activity planner, and that takes something off your plate, right? It helps them, something that they can, enjoy, something that perhaps is, again, provides another piece of training or not training, but, experience for their resume. Self-actualization is not really something that we, that's a very individual, that's a rather personal thing. Now, Maslow would say very few people have ever become self-actualized. Self-actualization is just becoming the best you can be. And that's an individual journey, but certainly we can play a role in that by working on their social and esteem needs. Any questions or comments about this? I've actually just started reading a book about human resources, and they say, not to talk about Maslow anymore, but I'm not there yet. I'm still talking about Maslow. So.
Well, I think you're right. I think it stems over like the universal, it could be staff to resident, could be management to staff. I mean, all of those things fall into place. They use it in MANT. Are they still using it in MANT, Kelly? Are they using it in MANT, Maslow still? MANT, Maslow.
Yeah, now that I've figured out how to unmute myself. Yeah. You thought I had to look up the answer, right?
Yeah. What sort of discussion do you have about this in MANT, Kelly? It's been a while since I taught MANT.
Well, we generally go through it just like you did. Somewhere just around safety and security needs, we talked about the fact that we've gotten pretty good at those. And where we tend to fall down and lose it is on the healthy relationship piece. And that we probably need to do a good deal more work in that area.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of what I deal with in HR and, you know, Darnell and I deal with is unhealthy relationships. So yes, Kelly, that's something we all of us need to work on and remind ourselves about. Again, I just started reading that HR book, and they talk about how important it is for HR directors to connect with employees. And I'll share with you, I don't do enough of that. I don't walk around the building. Terry Scott does a wonderful job with that. I would like to do more of that. Just walk around the building saying hello and greeting people. That's really important for someone in my role. And that's something you can do as a manager.
Yeah, it goes both ways, really. It's like every time you guys talk, I keep thinking about staff to clients. I just got that saying. I had a shy young man working in one of my programs. And he would kind of just come in, go into the nook and start, you know, and I was like, you know, it goes a long way with these guys if you establish some sort of rapport with them. Like, I know you're shy and you're not necessarily trying to be, you know, rude or anything, but it's just, you know, making that effort that every time you come in, you say, hey, how are you doing today? How's it going? Are you doing okay? It's good to see you. You know, that's sort of back and forth, and it really connects them to the staff. Once they hear that, it's sort of like, oh, but I've had many staff in the past who just would walk in, go in, not say a word to anybody, and they, you know, didn't respond well.
Yeah. Good.
I think it's good for meeting people where they're at too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, this is a good tool to, like, you know, if somebody doesn't feel safe, well, then you can't try to make them, you know, have healthy relationships with somebody, because that first need of safety is not being met yet. So I think that it's important for staff to realize that about residents too, is like, you have to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Like, you know, don't try to take 3 steps ahead. You know, meet them where they are in that hierarchy. And if they meet that need, then you can move on to something else. I think it goes a long way with autonomy too. Like, I have one person who is now managing their own finances, and I've seen a big improvement just in the general personality, the way she responds. Just having that independence and that autonomy has really made her feel like, well, it's up to me and I have to try, you know what I mean? And I'm trying to meet that need for myself.
Right, and it gives them that sense of achievement. That's a wonderful example. Yeah, that's a really wonderful example you gave, Ryan. Anyone else? Sano, did you have something you want to say?
Yes, I do. You know, in connection to language barrier, one thing that I've seen and I've known is also cultural differences. If a DSP is hired today and comes in here, you know, he always look at the manager as a figure that is above them in all levels. Then sometimes talking and, you know, looking at someone's eye is just not there because of where they came from. And another thing is, in most part of Africa, I'm talking about, you know, the employee who are Africans, because I know, you know, I'm from there and I know some of the cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them survived genocide.
Yeah.
And that, you know, comes with them all the way here. And it's a struggle for them to just, you know, let go of that. Certainly, you know, sometimes you'll find somebody who was just moody, maybe, you know, the mind went back to where, you know, how they survived and all the way that they're here now. So, you know, as a manager, I think it's important that we know all those kind of things, and then we treat them accordingly and welcome them. Then that's when they will feel like, oh, okay, this is where I belong. And you did mention about what can we make our employees to prefer GMS as opposed to the other 2 agencies, that 2 or 3 agencies that they work for. That's a tough question, but, you know, money can never buy it. But I think if we as managers try to open up to them because they're not going to open up to us as managers. It will only be us to them, you know, like, how can I help you? The first day you may probably just find a wall built. They cannot even, some of them will not even talk. But gradually, if you open up and you smile at them and you know, ask them, you know, some things, just, you know, tune your language. Feel them welcome, feel them, hey, this is your job. It will never, nobody's going to take it away from you. This is where you belong. You know, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, they'll eventually say, oh, you know what, I think I belong here. Then they begin to open up and you begin to know them. I don't, you know, like when I was in Khartoum, I used to, I had like 32 employees under me. I literally know like every person's family life history, what they have been through, what they're going through, and what's you know, like what's coming up. I was able to work with them hand in hand and make them feel they belong to the company that they was working for. So that's just one piece of one kind of information.
Yeah. That was wonderful. I thank you for that, to remind us about the cultural factor, and that's something that we could do a better job at as well, is understanding particularly the African culture a little bit more. I think, you know, we do a very general training around cultural differences, but I think it'd be good at some point to have, maybe that's something you can help us with, is create a training around understanding the African culture. Because what you just said, you know, people surviving genocide, we don't think about that, you know. And can you imagine if you're coming from a country where you just survived that, or maybe most of your family, if not all, has been killed. You come here and this is your first job. Right, it takes years, if ever, maybe never, to really shake that off. And that's, so there always, perhaps there's post-traumatic stress going on. There's always some aspect of that staying with them. So thank you for that. And we got 1 minute. So I have this slide and one last one. Gallup's 12 requirements for a great place to work. And these are all organized as questions, but do I know what is expected of me at work? Do I have the materials and equipment I need to do my work right? So we talked a lot about number 1. Number 2, you know, we've addressed through replacing, we've spent a lot of money over the last couple of years replacing all of our computers, because that was a big complaint among DSPs, is the junk that we had. And we worked with junky computers for a long time. So we just made a big investment. Do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? We've talked about that. In the last 7 days, have I received recognition or praise for good work? Be mindful of those people who never get the impressions, okay? And maybe come up with something to give them an impression for. Does my supervisor or someone at work seem to care about me as a person? We talked about that a lot today. Is there someone at work who encourages my development? Again, that should be you. At work, do my opinions seem to count? That is something, you know, you can discuss with each individual employee, and during a team meeting. Their opinions do count. It may not affect anything, but we definitely always want to know I always want to know what people are thinking. But again, people should know this, you know, their opinions count, but again, it may not affect, they may not impact decisions. That's just the reality of things. Does the mission and purpose of my company make me feel like my job is important? Well, it really should here at GMS. We have a wonderful mission statement, and remind DSPs that they're not glorified adult babysitters. That is not their job. They're not there just to, you know, barely observe someone while they're on their phone looking at Facebook. They're very important. Are my associates or my peers committed to doing quality work? We get a lot of complaints about that. people feel like their peers don't care or aren't doing quality work. We've had people leave because of that, because they're sick of people, people they work for, they work with. Do I have a best friend at work? I was surprised to see that. Not a lot of, a lot of people separate their personal lives from work, but that is important for a lot of people to build friendships at work. In the last 6 months, someone talked with me about my progress. I really hope that that's the case with every employee here, at least monthly, okay? This year, have I had opportunities to work to learn and grow? And we talked about that. That was a lot of what the video was about, to give people opportunities to grow while they're here. And last, this is just our fiscal year 2018 reasons for termination. They're all color coded. Of course, a big chunk of this are inactive relief. But again, what happened to those relief? Why did they become inactive? Most of them ended up working for other agencies. Terminations for conduct right here in the red, but quit without notice right here.
Yeah.
Now, I will update this slide for 2019, and I know this has shrunk, but still. And then, of course, training non-compliance. This is people who have moved. This is quit after disciplinary. So we give someone a written warning or a suspension, and then they quit right here. Leaving for a new career, which is great. I always wish people well. Actually, and then left for a similar job. So this is left for a similar job. This is a new career. I got to separate these colors a little better. All right, any questions? And what we want to do is shrink this right down. So I can tell you that for the last 3 years, our termination rate has decreased quite a bit. Our turnover rate has decreased quite a bit. Any questions or last comment, final comments? Thanks for your time. Hopefully you felt it was worth it. And the next time we meet, I'll do one a month here. We'll talk about competencies and expectations. So we'll get more into the evaluations. All right, guys, we'll see you all. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.